If you're watching this video, chances are you already know about Dragon Nest, the one that came out in the year 2010, that is. But did you know that it is actually far from the only Dragon Nest game to be released? So how many are there, you may ask? Well, at the time of me making this video, there are 18 known Dragon Nest games, including the original one. Yes, you heard that right. There are 18 goddamn Dragon Nest games, and I bet you've only ever heard of like 5 max that are on that list. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if there are even more of them that I've missed, so if I did, please tell me about these games in the comments. That said, in this video I'm gonna try to tell you as much as I can about each of these 18 games in a chronological order. Unfortunately, due to most of these games either being region locked, cancelled or literally dead, I couldn't play them for myself, which means I had to borrow most of my footage from other people, all of whom will be credited in the description. Additionally, I'll mainly be counting the earliest release date of any given game. For example, if a game came out in 2010 in Korea and in 2011 for China, I'm gonna count it as a 2010 game. With all of that out of the way, let's begin with the game that started it all, Dragon Nest. Just Dragon Nest this time. Developed by Identity Games, Dragon Nest was actually the first ever game produced by the company. According to Identity themselves, the game took them 3 years to develop, which is actually rather impressive to learn. By the way, did you know that Dragon Nest was originally created using the Eternity engine? The same engine that the original Doom was made on. Yeah, this game is that old. Anyway, if I had to describe the defining features of the original Dragon Nest, I'd say it's definitely the gameplay and combat mechanics. In a basic sense, this game is a third-person action MMORPG. While a lot of RPGs, especially in today's mobile and cross-platform climate, offer the players around 5 skills at max, Dragon Nest has what my friend decided to eloquently call the piano of skills, allowing you to employ up to 24 skills per character. Frankly, nobody is actually using that many skills unless they have absolutely no idea what they're doing, but the option is still there. Besides the large assortment, certain skill combinations also let you perform seamless combos with special animations. The class roster is diverse and offers a variety of playstyles suitable for any taste. Currently there are 11 basic classes. Warrior, Archer, Cleric, Sorceress, Academic, Kali, Assassin, Lancer, Machina, Wander, and Arta. Once you choose a specific character, you cannot switch them, only create a separate one. However, the subclasses, also known as jobs, are changeable. Each class has 4 jobs you can choose from, with the exception of Warrior, who has 5. We don't talk about Arta. There are also spin-off classes, which are basically an additional job type. As of me making this video, the only class without a spin-off is Wander. However, it has recently been confirmed to be in development, so yay for Wander mains. The character customization is pretty basic at the start. If you really don't like the available colors and hairstyles, the only way to change them after character creation is to pay real money in the cash shop, so choose wisely. The gameplay loop revolves around 2 main game modes, PvP and PvE. The first one is pretty self-explanatory for the most part. You load into the Colosseum and fight with other players. There are quite a lot of game modes, so let's get started. Ladder is a 1v1 fight with a random opponent, and the only mode which gives you a currency called ladder points instead of the standard medals. Respawn has players divided into 2 teams, where each team has to kill the opposing team members to attain points. The team which scores the required amount the fastest wins. Occupational war is similar, in a way that you also win by getting points, except now the points are earned whenever players occupy a base. Once again, the team which earns the required amount of points wins. Free-for-all is an up to 16 player match where the winner is determined by the number of overall kills. Rounds is a 2-team match where the goal is to wipe out the opposing team. Captain is very similar to rounds, except this time each team has a captain and the team loses only when the captain is killed. Ghoul mode divides players into humans and ghouls. The human contestants can't use skills and their weapons are replaced with bows, but they can still use items. To win, the humans must survive the round, while the ghouls must infect all humans with the ghoul virus. An alternative variation of the ghoul mode is Ghoul Mode Game of Thrones. Yes, that is the actual name. In this mode, there are no humans and everyone becomes a ghoul, with a random player assigned as the Ghoul King. Whoever kills the king inherits the title and earns a good chunk of points. The goal of the game is to be the last standing king and get the highest score. Lastly, all kill divides players into two teams and assigns one random player from each team to fight each other until one of them is eliminated. The team with the most surviving players wins. Guild War is a special mode since you can really only participate if you're in a guild. Basically, it's very similar to occupational war, except now each team leader has special guild skills that only they can use. Also, this game mode is really relevant nowadays, so can anyone please let me know if people still play this? Respawn, Round and Kill have an option to play against bots instead of real players, in case you're training or nobody else felt like playing on that particular day. However, the rewards aren't as good, so I guess AI isn't taking anyone's job this time around. Alright, I'm gonna say this right now. I am the last thing for my PvP player, so I can only provide you with this factual information. I'm also not gonna go that in depth with the PvP in any other games on this list, as I'll mainly be focusing on the mode most of these games, including this one, was built around: PvE. There are two main types of PvE content: dungeons and nests. Dungeons are the easiest content to clear as they mainly consist of minor enemies, possibly with mini-bosses, and one final boss at the very end. Nests are divided into three types: regular, raid, and event. Nests typically consist of 4 bosses and one final boss. Each of these bosses has its own specific mechanic that is necessary to learn in order to avoid unnecessary dying. Regular nests are pretty forgiving in that department, but raid nests aren't. Raids can either require a 4 or 8 player party and have much more elaborate mechanics, besides much stronger bosses. The one that always sticks out to me is that one fuck-ass Black Dragon platforming section. Yeah, I know it doesn't look that hard, but you only think that because you have never experienced Dragon Nest tank parkour. Lastly, event nests barely count as real nests, since they usually only exist to farm daily event currency. Although nowadays it is often neglected by the player base, Dragon Nest also has an ongoing story quest. I'm gonna spare you and just assume that you already know at least the basic lore, otherwise this video is gonna turn to a 10-hour lecture. The remarkable aspect of the game's story is that it's different depending on the character you choose to play as. The gist of it stays the same, but you'll get to see how that particular character happens to be involved in the overall plot, and learn some of the character-specific lore in the process. You may also meet some other playable characters as their NPC counterparts, so when reading you don't get to feel like you're the sole hero. But the characters you didn't choose to play as are still contributing to the story in the background. I could list many more aspects of the game here, but then we're gonna be here all day and I still have 17 more games to cover. In a nutshell, despite the many flaws that Dragon Nest has acquired over the years, there is a reason the game managed to survive for this long. And after finding such stellar success, Identity pulled out their developer buckets and began milking the franchise for all it's worth, which is how we arrived to their first mobile endeavor. It was around the time when the mobile gaming market was just starting to become mainstream, so seeing all the money-making potential, Identity decided to become its early adapter. The very first game in their spin-off timeline is Dragon Nest: Continent Exploration, also known as Dragon Nest Continental Adventure or Dragon Nest Wonderland. It was exclusive to China and was available for a very limited time, from its release in July of 2014 to November 5th of the same year. So what is this game exactly? Well, have you ever wanted to play Monopoly but Dragon Nest? If your answer is anything other than what, then this game was made for you. This is also where I have to admit that no matter how hard I tried, I swear to God, I could not find a single recording of this game. Not even an announcement trailer. So unfortunately, I'm just gonna have to show you all the screenshots I could find instead. I'll even throw in a Kyle gift just to make it more fun. Anyway, from what I've managed to piece together from various articles, the gameplay goes like this. The game supports up to 4 players at a time. You can either play with your friends or against a computer if you couldn't convince anybody else to download this. Instead of using one of those regular Monopoly tokens, you can choose to play as one of the iconic Dragon Nest characters. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find the full available roster, but it definitely included the OG4, the Blacksmith and the Reen. Everything else is very similar to the real Monopoly, except all the land plots are named after in-game towns, dungeons and nests. The game begins after each player chooses a card. Whoever picks the so-called priority card will start the turn. The dice system in here is actually pretty interesting. Instead of just tapping the button and getting a randomized number, the number is determined by how long you hold down the button. AKA, the longer you press, the larger the number you get will be. There is also a specific item you can use that can determine whether the number you get will be odd or even. If both of your dice land on the same number, you're allowed to re-roll them. But if you do this 3 times in a row, you'll get thrown into a chaos rift and will be unable to act for 3 turns. So basically, this is the Dragon Nest equivalent of going to jail. If the tile you land on is unclaimed, you can immediately occupy it. But if the tile is already claimed by another player, the price of buying it out will double. Once the tile is upgraded to level 3, you can unlock a so-called landmark tower, which greatly increases the tile's income and prevents other players from claiming it. Players also can gain advantage by upgrading their characters and raising their stats. These stats include dice manipulation, increases control over the dice roll accuracy, construction cost discount, as you can imagine, lowers the cost of construction, and acquisition cost discount, decreases the cost of buying land from another player. To win the game, you need to achieve one of the 4 victory conditions: bankrupting the other players, acquiring the most assets within the time limit, monopolizing all 3 regions, or forming an alliance by occupying all tiles on the same side. Overall, I think that a Dragon Nest Monopoly is a funny concept, and I honestly love to try playing it if I had the chance, or had any friends who would play this with me. Funnily enough, this mobile game released way earlier than the official Monopoly's one. There was also a promotional contest lasting from the game's release date to 5th of August, where the top 1 leaderboard players would win a Xiaomi Mi 3 phone, which is like the Chinese version of the iPhone 5. Second to 5th places would win a dollar store power bank, a noticeably less desirable prize. And those ranking from 6th to 10th place would win a backpack that doesn't even look like it has anything to do with Dragon Nest. I suppose you don't look a gift horse in the mouth, but a backpack? Really? Anyway, the game has been received rather positively among the Chinese audience, and was fairly popular. So why did it only last for 5 months? Well, apparently such a short lifespan was out of Identity's control, as it turned out to be that the game had some sort of major memory issue. The issue was so terminal that the dev realized that it would be easier to put the game out of its misery rather than try to fix it. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any details as to what the exact issue was. Like, was it a memory leak or something to do with a hard-coded memory cap? So we might never know what actually happened. But that is how the run of the first Dragon Nest mobile game has ended. Fine then. After all, this was Identity's first attempt at a mobile game. So that means things are gonna pick up from here, right? Oddly enough, I really struggled to find a concrete release date for this game. It was first announced around October 16th of 2012, and at the time it was supposed to come out sometime in the first half of 2013. Then I found some sources that claim it's only been released in 2015. But then Identity's own website listed this game as being in development all the way until October 2019, until its page has just been unceremoniously erased from existence. Now I know why this game is called Labyrinth. Trying to find any info on it will send you on a wild goose chase. Well, to be fair, that's gonna be like the case with most of these games. Later, I finally managed to find a reliable source that actually lists Labyrinth true release date, April 8th, 2015. I'm starting to feel that absolutely nobody cared about this game, since it took me 50 billion years just to dig up such a basic piece of information. Even the devs stopped giving a shit. In fact, they gave so little shit that on their company's website they listed it as unspecified mobile game. So what is this game anyway? Unlike the original game, Labyrinth is a top-down dungeon crawler. What's also interesting is that Identity wasn't working on this game alone. This is where I have to introduce another recurrent company you're gonna see a lot in this video, AlexDNSEA. It's yet another Korean company under Shanda Games, so basically Identity's cousin. Although at some point in 2015, AlexDNSEA actually got renamed to Identity Mobile, so I guess they got absorbed by Identity and became their mobile subdivision. Alright, ain't nobody wanna hear about the company part, so let's get back to the actual game. The game begins with a little exposition video, and it's really weird. According to the announcement info, this game was supposed to take place 500 years after the original Dragon Nest events. But this intro makes everything extremely confusing. According to it, Dragon Nest is the name of the legend about the dragon's hidden treasure. Okay, which dragon? There are like 10 of them if we count all the ancient chaos descendants. Whatever. Now this definitely not Shen, guys, preparing to find this legendary unspecified dragon treasure. But before he even manages to set foot on his journey, he gets bonked on the head by some random goblin. He's hit so hard that he starts tweaking out and hallucinating the ancient black dragon raid. Wait, what? 4 heroes? Huh? What the hell happened to Velskut and Barnak? Also, why did they decide to go with this movie R version of Terramite? I swear, they always find a way to fuck him up. And right after all that, you're thrown right into the character creation screen. Alright, one thing at a time. I can see why they made it 4 heroes instead of 6. Because they wanted to tie it together with the 4 available classes. Even though this absolutely destroys the lore, I can get the reason. But what the hell is the rest of this story? Is the plot that some random child gets his brain smashed in, and all this is happening inside a coma-induced dream? Or is this an isekai game? Did they just decide to scrap the 500 years in the future thing I didn't tell anyone? Whatever the hell is happening here, I guess it's not really important, because after that point, none of the lore actually matters and you're thrown straight into the tutorial. But before that, let's get back to choosing your character. For some reason they seemingly forgot to add any music to this part, so it looks extremely awkward. Anyway, there are only 4 classes in this game. Warrior, Archer, Sorceress and Cleric, so they are Gs. The character customization is extremely limited. Just repeatedly click randomize until you land on a character that isn't too ugly. Once you're satisfied with your limited choices, you are instantly thrown to what I think is supposed to be your character's dream sequence, where they're already at level 40. You'd think this is where the tutorial would start, but no. It starts only after you finish the dungeon. The actual tutorial starts on stage 101. Why? Bruh, unless my IQ is literally 21, I would have already figured out the controls during that other dungeon. And why couldn't they just have shown all these pop-ups back then in the first place? If the controls are difficult, tap the auto button. Ah yes, good to see this game is inclusive of people who tragically lost their left thumb. Otherwise, I can't imagine anyone who would be having trouble in here. The combat controls are equally as easy. Hold down for normal attack and tap the skills to use them. There is also no job system. Instead, you can choose which type of normal attack you want to have. For sorcerers, it's lightning, fire or ice, the latter of which you unlock after level 10. Similar to the original DN, you can play in a party with friends or randos. You can also create more characters for your account, and that's it. That is literally all you do in this game. But what about the dungeons? Well, the first two dungeons are literally the same. And if they're not, they're literally impossible to tell apart. They have the same type of enemies and even the same boss. The later dungeons do start adding new enemy types, but here's the problem. All of the dungeons that are located in one area look exactly the same. They look so similar to the point where I feel like I'm tweaking out, and they're all literally just the same map, but each level just spawns you in a slightly different spot. I'm not even playing the game and I still feel like I'm going insane. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any videos going past the tutorial, so I'm just gonna assume that there isn't anything worth recording past that point. Alright, the one nice thing I can say about this game is that the graphics are kinda cute. That's it. Besides that, the only thing this game has in common with Dragon Nest is reused voice lines. Dragon Nest Labyrinth honestly feels like a bootleg. You know, on those mobile games that put other more popular titles in the ads or name to attract attention. Yeah, if I didn't know this was actually made by Identity, I'd think this was just some rip-off trying to cash in on the Dragon Nest IP. I'm sorry to the 3 people who loved this game, but it's definitely one of the weakest on this list. Oh, and by the way, remember how I said that literally nobody gave a shit about this game? Well, while I was doing my research, I found the article about Labyrinth on Baike, which is basically the Chinese Wikipedia. And as I was reading it, I've noticed that the provided screenshots look nothing like the actual game. At first I thought that this was from the 2013 prototype that we were teasing back in the day. But that was until I decided to reverse search this image and learned that for some incomprehensible reason, they decided to use screenshots from a completely unrelated game called Dragon Whale and referred to them as Dragon Nest mobile game. Yes, this is 100% real. You can look this up yourself. I couldn't possibly make this shit up. Since even the Chinese player base is giving a rat's ass, I can now conclude without a shadow of a doubt that Dragon Nest Labyrinth was a big fat flop. Origin is one of the most mysterious titles on this list, only rivaled by the one following it. The plans for this game were confirmed, but it was never released and nobody knows anything about it. It was announced on the 27th of May 2015, along with a few other games I'll cover later. The trailer for this game was just an epic montage of the shots from the original DN, and I'm also pretty sure it started lagging on the title drop. The only tidbits of info I managed to find about Origin is that this game was supposed to be a one-to-one recreation of the PC Dragon Nest experience but on mobile. But since it was never heard from again, I suppose things didn't exactly go according to plan. And here it is, the most obscure Dragon Nest game of all time. It was announced at the exact same conference as Origin, but for some reason this one didn't even get a spotlight in the trailer video. The only reason we even know it was supposed to exist is because of this poster image. Dragon Nest vs Dungeon Striker was also referred to as Project D&D, except it has nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons. Judging by the name, it was supposed to be a crossover between Identity's 2 most successful titles. Dungeon Striker was Identity's second franchise separate from Dragon Nest, released in South Korea on 15th of May 2013. No info about this game besides the announcement has been released, but I have a little gameplay that has been cancelled because Dungeon Striker happened to shut down a year later on 11th of February 2016. However, another game of the franchise named Dungeon Striker Code M, later renamed to Dungeon Striker Begins, was also announced in the exact same conference as all these other games. And it did actually end up coming out on October 4th of 2015, but was overall extremely obscure and definitely had absolutely nothing to do with Dragon Nest. This is literally all I could find about D&D. Whatever this was never released and was swept under the rug alongside Origin. I'm starting to think that these 2 games were announced as a marketing ploy just to scam potential investors. But other than that, one more game was actually teased at the same time alongside them. And unlike these two abortions, it actually ended up releasing a year later. But for now, it will be a while before we actually get to talk about it. As it turns out, this game has some weird history behind it, because originally it was supposed to be based on the Dragon Nest movie. Luckily, the gods decided to strike down any plans to expand that god-forsaken universe, so that never happened. I've already described all the relevant events in my Throne of Elves review, but I've never mentioned anything about this game. I try not to repeat myself too much, so if you're interested to hear more details, watch that video later. This side-scroller beat-em-up was released in December 2010, 2015, in China, and was initially called Dragon Nest Dawn or Dragon Nest Warriors Dawn. This part was honestly confusing. And by taking a look at its teaser, gameplay and trailers, you can't even tell that this is supposed to be a movie tie-in, since you can't even play as Lambert and Sorceress only appeared in the movie for like 3 seconds. Very notably, Cleric is completely missing from the main 4 for some reason. Maybe this game isn't gonna be so bad after all. But maybe the lack of movie characters was a hint of things brewing in the background. Because later in 2016, Shanda Games announced that their licensing contract with the movie company has expired in August 2015, which led Shanda and Identity to detach themselves from everything related to the movie. Because of this, the game has been renamed to Dragon Nest Dawn of Light, and every major reference to the movie has been removed from the game. But honestly, I'm not even sure how many of them were there in the first place, since the only gameplay video I could find was already after the breakup incident. I have a theory that the reason the trailers never featured any movie characters was because the movie tie-in idea was actually scrapped even before the first promo material was released, since Shanda already knew they were cutting ties with Melee Pictures. I can definitely see some artifacts for the movie still remaining, since the tutorial starts on Barnak's ship. At least I think that's what it was supposed to be. And this is where things get strange, because Barnak is nowhere in sight, and instead Argenta is the one explaining all the basics. The most notable part about Dawn of Light is that it's fully 2D compared to the previous mobile titles we look at. Because of this, the graphics have this distinct paper cutout look to them, which I kinda fuck with. The combat is pretty basic. At first only 3 skills are available, but their number later gets upgraded to 7. But just when you're starting to get into the game's events, turns out that the boss for this tutorial mission is goddamn Aisha of all dragons. What? Girl, what the hell are you even doing here? Did they really wanna distance themselves from the movie so bad they even changed the dragon? Anyway, we defeat Aisha with Argenta's help, but it turns out she got the last laugh and broke the airship engine. It crashes, which leads to the unprompted fanservice scene, where Argenta has red eyes for some reason. Bruh, y'all literally had one job. How is anyone supposed to go into this now? After that, you're prompted to choose one of the 3 playable characters. This is where I began to contemplate, why exactly did they decide to leave Cleric out of all classes? At first I thought it's because the game is single player, but then I found out that's not the case, so I think they just justifiably hate his ass. But then there is Archer. Sure, I usually don't have a problem with her, but for this style of game, she definitely looks the most awkward to play. First up, whenever she has to fight small enemies, her arrows are literally too high to even reach them. But for some reason they still somehow land a hit, which just looks really janky. The second reason is that Archer has always been a ranged class, which worked well in the original game, since the dungeons usually provide a lot of open space for her to gain distance and jump around. Here, playing Archer just feels claustrophobic. Most of the time she's shooting her arrows at blank point range. And when she's not, it feels like she's trying her best to escape this little box she's been forced inside in. So if I had to pick one class out of the OG4 to exclude from this game, I would have to pick Archer. The rest of the 2 classes don't have this problem, since they're either mid or close range. In fact, it's really satisfying to see Sorceress freeze the entire field in one tap or Warrior turn into a fidget spinner. But watching Archer just feels awkward. Like, it just makes me wanna put my hand through the screen and pull her out to freedom. Anyway, this was the second attempt to switch the gameplay from a third-person RPG, and at least it's much more engaging than Labyrinth, but you can still see that this is not Identity's strong suit. And at this point, I think the devs have realized that, because they decided to slow down on the experimentation and come back to what they already know. Or at the very least, that was the plan. Once again, I struggled to find the release date of this game until I miraculously managed to stumble my way onto its tap page. Initially it was called Dragon Nest Awake during its beta test, but was later renamed to Dragon Nest Mobile, or simply Dragon Nest M for short. It was the very first successful attempt of making a mobile Dragon Nest game that would feel similar to the original experience. But you may also know this game as the thing that gave us the cursed white Kali. Bruh, I heard that the Chinese love white people, but come on, was it really necessary to dump my girl into a tub of bleach? Besides the original 4, the playable cast consists of the aforementioned whitewashing victim, academic and assassin. And yeah, you should start getting used to this character selection tree, because you're gonna see more of it later. A lot of it. This time there is no appearance customization. Either the option shows up at some point later, or it's only available through the cash shop. Unfortunately, nobody recorded that part, so I'll never know. After choosing a character, we see a short clip of Argenta and Wellscoot looking up at the primordial star, which signifies the rise of the prophet. Finally, we get some actual Dragon Nest lore in a Dragon Nest game. Following that, we're thrown straight into the middle of the ruined Keldrug and have to defend it from a wave of mobs. Compared to the last installments, the game is already much more fun to look at. Although, any Dragon Nest mobile port is gonna have a problem with the skill variety compared to the original game. Here you can use up to 5 skills alongside an ultimate. The skill tree is actually extremely similar to the original DN. You can upgrade your skills and choose whichever ones to use in your rotation. All this is explained by the most uncanny female voice I have ever heard. It sounds so weird that I can't even tell whether it's bad text-to-speech, a person who can't speak English trying their best to say the words how they're supposed to sound like, or this is a skinwalker.
Skill learning is an indispensable step on the way of growth. Indifferent skills can be combined together according to your own preferences.
This voice is really odd because it only shows up in tutorials and the rest of the characters don't talk in English, so I'm not really sure why it's really necessary. Nonetheless, after wiping out all the trash mobs, the big boss appears alongside it, and suddenly all the other classes spawn in to help you too. But after you finally beat it, turns out that this was all just a dream and this is where the real game begins. Now where have I seen that before? Also, I think that something must have been lost in translation here, because after waking us up, Irene straight up calls us a pig. Maybe this is why Lindsay hates her ass. Irene called her a pig too.
Like Irene totally deserves to die.
Hold up. This game used to be called Dragon Nest Awake, and we literally start the game by awaking. We are now in the middle of Saint Haven, and Irene tells our fat lazy pig ass to go find our mentor. From this point on, the game sticks to the source material and each class has their own variations in the story. But they're pretty minor from what I've seen, because no matter who you pick, the beginning is still the same. You go to the first dungeon and see Rose getting kidnapped. You try to fight out the monsters, but she gets taken away. After that, I'm gonna assume that the story follows the same beats as the original DN, since once again, nobody bothered to record anything past that point. Instead, they did record some raids, so that's how I know they exist. Overall, this game is an alright attempt to port the Dragon Nest experience to a handheld device. I do have to note that there are no other towns available besides Saint Haven, which may get a little stale after a while. But overall, the players consider Dragon Nest M to be one of the best mobile ports of all time, compared to some of our future entries. But is it just the nostalgia speaking, or are they actually right? Well, there's only one way to find out, isn't there? Before I tell you about this game, I have to admit that I almost completely missed its existence until I went back into my sources to look for footage, even though it's not nearly as obscure as some of the previous games on this list. Dragon Nest Endless War was made in collaboration with a distributor Ifan Studio, which specializes in releasing games in Chinese-speaking regions, South Korea and Southeast Asia. Endless War was released in mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. Despite being released on Chinese territories only, Endless War was made by Identity and not Shanda, which I do find kinda surprising. This game had a pretty short lifespan, as the game shut down on October 11th of the same year of its release. According to this official Facebook post, the reason for the game's demise was an expiring licensing contract between Identity and Ifan, which just reminds me of the Dragon Nest movie situation again. This game isn't even mentioned on Ifan's website, so it looks like they weren't really proud of being involved. But what are they trying to hide? Well, let's take a look, shall we? The art style in Endless War looks rather similar to Labyrinth, except without those weird mutant yaoi hands it had. It actually reminds me of Dungeon Striker of all things. Maybe this is where all the cancelled Project D&D assets ended up at. While researching, I found another absolute biker gem that rivals the Dragon Veil incident. Because they described Endless War as a game that features background music and sound effects. Well, I was kinda on the fence about it before, but now I'm totally sold. The game opens up with a very confusing cutscene, and the fact that I could only manage to figure out what was going on through shitty Google translation didn't help one bit. But from what I understood, the plot goes something like this. The monolith was opened, so the Black Dragon attacked and war broke out in Legendia. Yes, I did not misspeak just now. For some reason, the Black Dragon is the Beyond Dragon 2 in this universe. This time around, the Beyond Dragon sequel had a much easier time overtaking Legendia, since Gerant and Argenta both kicked the bucket. Because of this, the only one remaining to protect the world was Wellscud. That's right, Wellscud. The guy who absorbed the Black Dragon jewel was the one fighting the Black Dragon. Did nobody in the writer's room really have a problem with this? Anyway, Wes could realize that there is no way he's gonna be defeating that bitch by himself. So he decides that the best course of action to save the world is to send a random kid 100 years into the past to prevent the dragon attack. Yeah, apparently my golf boy took Lunaria's job and can just do that now. Not to mention how utterly goofy this whole plan is. Oh, our whole world is gonna be nuked by an evil dragon. Yeah, just send a teenage anime protagonist over there. He's gonna fix that shit up in no time. But the interesting part about this is that this is actually not the last time we're gonna see the sending character hundreds of years back in time to prevent the end of the world plot. Yeah, the devs really thought that the plot from Labyrinth was so fire that they ended up reusing it several times in future games. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Anyway, the actual game starts with the main character barging into a dialogue between Argenta and Elena. And for some reason, everybody in this game is talking in this weird bubbling acid filter in their voice. Turns out that Elena put Argenta in the Saw Trap dungeon and now we have to escape it. Argenta gives us some cool drip because she doesn't want our level 1 noob ass to die in one hit. And we make it to the end of the dungeon. We then explain that we were sent back in time, which she just believes instantly. Our discussion is interrupted by the sight of Gerant flying by in the distance, and we rush over to help him, I think. Wait, where did our drip go? This is still supposed to be part of the same dungeon, right? Damn, Argenta didn't even let us rent it for more than one loading screen. Well, screw you too then. Even though we presumably came to help Gerant, we don't actually find neither him nor the Black Dragon, just some irrelevant enemy orc. I'm not even sure why this section is even here. When we're done, we magically get teleported to Saint Haven, and our main character already wants to go home. See, this is why you shouldn't have sent a random ass kid to save the world. Them Gen Alphas can't even focus on one task without iPad and 6-7 Labubu Dubai chocolate. Now this is just sad. They didn't even bother to give the blacksmith a sprite. Damn, we really went from him being a playable character in continent exploration to this, huh? Talking about characters, you might be wondering how many classes this game includes. Well, quite a lot this time. However, Endless War doesn't actually have a traditional Dragoness class system, because this is a gacha game. You start out as warrior and get the rest of the characters through the so-called Ancient Altar, or through quest missions. Yeah, I also can't believe Genshin Impact stole their summoning animation from Dragon Nest Endless War. Anyway, you can bring up to 4 heroes to a dungeon with you. Oddly enough, this is where another similarity with Genshin comes in, because instead of the other characters fighting alongside you, you can switch between them mid-battle. The playable characters are divided into 3 types: physical, magical, and hybrid. Every character has 3 skills in total, not counting normal attack. As you could have already noticed, this game is exclusively vertical, since the game was designed to be played with one hand only while your other hand is too busy, quenching your excitement over the Argenta PNG. What the fuck?! Considering this design feature, I'm actually surprised this game wasn't released in Japan. And if you're wondering why I'm bringing that up all of a sudden, stay tuned for the future entries. This is all cool and all, but I can't help but wonder. I get why our main character is back in time 100 years, but what are the other characters that didn't get teleported by Wellscott doing here? This is what you might say. But what if these are not the same characters, but just very similar ones that lived 100 years ago? Alright, then how do you explain Kali, who has the exact same backstory as the one in the real game? Actually, that is the case with literally every one of them. But there is something weird with my girl sorceress, because there are 2 of them for some reason. Besides Angelica, we also have Candice. But who's Candice, you ask? Candice not. Instead of a crippling gambling addict, Candice is a sorceress born into a rich family of powerful mages. So basically she's a weird shipchild of Angelica and Charlotte. The only other fact I found about her is that she's mentally ill. I am not making this up. Oddly enough, this game has a bunch of weird playable OCs like this. I couldn't find the full playable roster, but some noticeable individuals include Jack Black,
Chicken Jockey,
Uncle Iroh, a random ancient, TikTok e-girl, Ellie Last of Us, Old Man Jenkins, Ren's normie cousin, and a fucking furry lion. I have absolutely no idea why they decided to make a bunch of glub shitters instead of using existing beloved Dragon Nest NPCs to fill the playable roster. The thing is, they did add the other more appropriate characters, but either they weren't available on release or were extremely rare, cause I've never seen anyone pull them. Oddly enough, Angelica is considered to be an S rank compared to the rest of the OG4 who are A ranks. Actually, I do agree, Sorceress is the best class, thank you very much game. And is apparently also the horniest class, because what the absolute fuck happened here? The only other class considered to be an S rank is Academic. I'm not really sure how this ranking system is decided. Either way, after a few filler dungeons later, we do finally get to the Black Dragon. And this is where the lore starts to get stinky. Instead of getting mad at Gerant over his dragon identity, Wells could just casually hit him in the fucking face, while Argenta is witnessing all of that happening like her shit don't stink. Well, at least they didn't yeet Feather out of the plot for no reason this time. I also absolutely love this Gerant sprite. He looks so salty about the whole situation, and I can't even blame him. But Wells could still fuse with the jewel off camera, and Delina teleports into the cutscene just to say, "You can't be for real, bruh." Anyway, I couldn't find much of the story past this point, and whatever I found wasn't that interesting, so I'ma stop here. To tell the truth, I have absolutely no idea why this game exists. considering that over 80% of its playable characters don't even look like they had anything to do with the original game. I get a feeling that at some point this was supposed to be a standalone title, but then someone at the executive team said, nah bruh, nobody's gonna give a shit if we don't attach a Dragon Nest trademark to this. I also feel like eFund was probably expecting the game to perform much better than it did, which was the reason they gave up on it so easily and didn't even try to renew the licensing contract. Well, it's either that or the fire came from Identity's side. But this wasn't a big loss for them, since 2017 actually ended up to be a very eventful year in the Dragon Nest mobile game universe. No, I'm not showing you Dragon Nest M again. This is Dragon Nest Saint Haven. So what if it looks exactly the same as the previous game? See? This one has more funny animations and the characters look slightly different now. Oh wait, this video skips the beginning section for some reason. Let me pull it up real quick. Wait, hold the fuck up. This is literally the same intro as Dragon Nest Labyrinth. Now that's a cameo I did not expect to see. Except, wait a minute, the visuals are the exact same, but the story is different. Now the 4 not 6 heroes are fighting the Red Dragon? No they fucking aren't. That doesn't even look like the Red Dragon. Not to mention that this shit makes absolutely zero sense. Anyway, the plot of the game is this. Feda succeeded in fucking shit up to the point where Althea herself wakes up from her coma and sends the player back in time to stop him and find Rose. Wait, so not only did this game reuse the Labyrinth cutscene, but also ripped off its scrapped plot too. And here I thought the M similarities were bad. But wait, you definitely can't call it the same game, since we're spawning at Mana Ridge now. And if you're confused as to why the hell the game called Dragon Nest Saint Haven is not the one that actually starts in Saint Haven, don't worry, I'm also confused. As soon as you load into town, you're greeted with this ethereal tampon commercial voice.
Let's get to know what's going on around here.
I'm honestly not sure why this lady is even here. Half of the time you can't even make out what she says from the obnoxious sound effect overlay.
Heroes, don't try to spare yourself.
Once again, Irene is the first one to welcome us. God damn it, we are not gonna beat the M-rape of allegations like this. Well, at least she's not gonna call us a pig this time. We get into our dungeon flashback, trying to recall how we arrived to Mana Ridge. As you may have already noticed, this game has even less skills than M for some reason, which means that there's even less stuff to do. Well, at least we get this cool dungeon complete animation now. Anyway, we remember that we were trying to fight the Minotaurs because they knew something about Rose. The local cleric says he doesn't know who she is, but apparently Barnack does? Now wait a damn minute, what fucking universe did we time travel to? At the time where Barnack was part of the 6 heroes, Rose wasn't even born yet. And by the time she was, Barnack was already dead from the Black Dragon poison. Alright, this shit wasn't making any sense before, and now it's progressively deteriorating.
There's no way this could get any worse. It's worse. It's much worse.
Oh no. It's not just any Barnack. It's the fucking movie Barnack. Why? Alright, I went out to do some research specifically for this. In the original game, Barnack makes his first appearance during Extra Chapter 3, Beginning of a Legend. It was introduced during Cap 70, which came out in 2013 on Korea and 2014 on Southeast Asia. This game came out all the way in 2017 and is already reusing models from the original DN. So could anyone please tell me, why the fuck did they decide to go out of their way to make the model for Barnack based on the movie appearance from scratch, when they already had a perfectly functional pre-made and canon model? I'd understand if this is a movie tie-in game, but it's not. Did they already forget that they were trying to distance themselves from the movie universe? They already had to completely rehaul Dawn of Light specifically for that reason, and now we get this out of nowhere. Was the dev team in charge of Saint Haven just locked in the identity dungeons without access to the outside world, and nobody told them? What the hell happened here? Later we even get a Lambert name drop for absolutely no reason. Does that mean this game is supposed to take place after the movie's events? Oh wait, they're actually gonna address the Black Dragon poison inconsistency. Psych, you thought. Apparently Barnack was healed, but nobody's gonna explain how that happened because fuck you, that's how. And alright, let's say he did take some Flintstones vitamin gummies and cured his poison status effect. He would still be an old ass man by the time everyone was looking for Rose. So yeah, this plot is still stupid and sucks. And what's this? Did his model just unironically glitch out? Damn, I guess Barnack really let himself go. He can't even hold his own axe. Anyway, this game does have its own defining features compared to M. Well, besides all of the atrocities we just witnessed. First is the option to fight mobs in the overworld instead of the dungeons. And the other one is that this is a gacha game. Here, all the usually playable classes that are missing from the roster become heroes, along with some NPCs. Well, at least the character roster here is much better than the OC landfill in Endless War. And yeah, this summoning animation is simply glorious.
Hooray!
You can have up to 4 of these heroes in your party, who function like both teammates, but you can also take control of them too. The characters can be leveled up by making them drink liters of Listerine.
The Among Us potion from the dark web.
Unfortunately, they don't follow you around in the overworld, only in dungeons. Talking about dungeons, what the hell is this? Are these the fucking goblin models from Labyrinth? Huh? They already had normal goblins earlier, why did they add these chibi goblins with yaoi hands in here? Great, now I'm gonna have to add art style clash to the list of this game's sins. This is where I have to talk about the combat in this game. Just like everything else about it, it's a weird mix between Labyrinth's top-down perspective and M's action skills. As I've already said, now there are only 4 skills counting normal attack. But if you think that this is still too much for you, there is a semi-auto mode where all you have to do is to wait for the cooldowns on your 2 buttons. And I don't know if I just don't like top-down games or something, but the combat in Saint Haven is just leagues more boring than in M or even Dawn of Light. And that feeling isn't made any better by the fact that this game can literally play itself. Alright, let me explain why we even came to fight the yaoi goblins in the first place. Just like in the OG Dragon Nest, we have to fix the airship to make it to the title city of the game. Except here the ship is in mana reach for some reason. So, just like in the real game, we go to a dungeon to get the missing parts for the ship. Except now when we do that, we find out that the goblins were using these parts as chew toys or something, and now they're broken. Oh no, how are we gonna fix the airship now? By going to a merchant across the street and buying some new parts, of course. You have got to be kidding me. Why the hell couldn't Hubert's broke lazy ass just buy these parts himself then? What was even the point of that dumbass dungeon just now? Fine. Our next quest is gathering some catnip to get freebies from the merchant, cause all of the previous endeavors clearly didn't pay us enough. You know what would be the last enemy I'd expect to see in a field full of catnip? Dogs. Man, I love immersive level design. Also, how did we even acquire catnip just now? This plant is clearly named Wild Herbosa. I'm gonna headcanon that we just grabbed some dog piss covered leaves from a random bush and Panya is just too tweaked out to know any better. Either way, for some reason, instead of going straight to Saint Haven, we stay in Mana Ridge and try to figure out their monster problem. And at that point, I feel like the order of quests ain't making any sense. It would be much more logical to put the airship repair quest after we solve the Mana Ridge problems. But here it's the exact opposite. I know all of this is happening while we're waiting for Hubert to do his thing, but bruh, the scene pacing here is just real ass. Talking about him, after that weird detour, turns out he also needs a charged J.O. crystal to make the airship fly. We go to another dungeon to find it and we meet Lunaria of all people. She ain't feeling too well, so Barnack says we should give her some valerian root or something. We got the exact same plant which we gave to the cat merchant earlier. Maybe it really was valerian. Your reward for doing that is a free character of your choice. White Kali, Camillina or Lunaria. Ah yes, Lunaria, my favorite Dragon Nest class. And this is the farthest point I've ever seen anyone reach in this game. Yeah, after all this time, we don't even get to see the city that is in the game's title. To be honest, I'm not even gonna be surprised if they forgot to add Saint Haven to a game explicitly called Dragon Nest Saint Haven. Everything about this game absolutely baffles me. It feels like a weird hybrid of M and Labyrinth made by someone who only learned the Dragon Nest lore through the movie. I feel bad for every poor child who was forced to play this instead of the real game, because their parents couldn't afford a PC. If I said Dragon Nest Labyrinth was the weakest game on this list, then Saint Haven is definitely the worst on this list. I know we still have a bunch of games to go, but at least this is the worst we're ever gonna get. Alright, I've been waiting to talk about this game ever since briefly mentioning it in my Throne of Elves review. And also, yeah, it's that one game I mentioned that Identity didn't end up aborting for once. You guys might be wondering why I'm not giving Identity any shade for reusing models in all of these games. Well, first up, I don't think it's actually that big of a deal in the cases where they're trying to port the source material onto a different platform. But the other reason is because they did decide to make completely original models in a new style specifically for this game. And I really wish they didn't. This time, Identity tried to play with the graphics. And lost. I don't know about you, but I don't wanna see hyper-realistic Gerant ever again. The graphics in the actual game look nothing like this, of course. This is a mobile game released in 2017 after all, not a PS4 title. I don't know, this game just kinda has this uncanny, uncomfortable look to it. Especially these 2D dialogue sprites. The way they move just reminds me of the Bowser fart gif. But maybe that's just a matter of preference, because personally I always found this semi-realistic style ugly as hell. Despite having 2 in the title, this game is actually a prequel, taking place 500 years before the main game's events. Damn, these Identity devs really like the number 500, don't they? Despite this plot point, the game isn't actually canon to the original one, so this is just another AU from the ancient arc. This story follows Giant and Argenta and their Beta 6 Heroes party. The other 2 playable characters are Sorceress Marion and the warrior Gavel. So basically you have a zesty warrior, a straight warrior, and a woman. Argenta was supposed to become playable at some point, but I couldn't find any videos of people showcasing her, so I'm not sure if she ever came out. Once you pick your character, you can choose 3 skills out of the available 6 and you're good to go. Each character gets a bit of their own lore, but all of them end up in some village named Lunarheim. Yeah, I have no idea where that is. Giant was brought there after getting amnesia, Marion was sent there by the royal wizard, and Gavel was just living there. The village is attacked and now your chosen character has to defend it. The combat and tutorial are pretty dynamic. It may look somewhat similar to M, but here it's actually expanded with a combo system. You can purchase more skills and combine them in a so-called combo chain, where once you use a skill, the next in line will be available to use immediately after. In a way, it's kinda similar to the original D&D skill combos, but except here it's automized due to mobile limitations. Overall, it looks like Identity are slowly starting to figure out a good handheld combat system. We move on and meet who I'm gonna headcanon as Karahan's ancestor. And unless I'm tripping out, they're also both voiced by the same dude too.
과연 그 하등한 머릿속에 살아 나올 만한 단어군.
이 궁극의 아름다움을 다시는 보지 못할 것이다.
I don't know why, but somehow this game's Karahan is the only character in this game that doesn't give me the ick when looking at him. Probably because his face looks way more anime and stylized compared to the others with their underdeveloped early 2000s video game realism stink. But my favorite part about not Kahan is that he calls Gerant Blondie.
다음 만남을 기대하지. 금발의 기사여.
Anyway, after we shoo Kahan's great-grandpa from the village, we get to see the in-game town for the first time. And we also get to see this goofy running animation. My guy runs like it feels to run in a dream, but for some reason the running on sand only activates when in town. The animation looks completely fine in dungeons, so I don't know what happened here. From what I've seen, there isn't too much to tell about the story. Or maybe I only say that because the last time we had too much to talk about. You won't find any secret Dragon Nest lore here, since this takes place in an alternative universe, so I doubt there's much to miss. Unless maybe you're a Gerant fan, which I'm not. I would much rather this game be all about Kahan's grandpa and what led his future grandson to become the Dragon Nest Epstein. Either way, gameplay-wise, I think this is their best mobile game so far. I'd say that the biggest problem of Legend is the graphics. As a Dragon Nest fan myself, I think the target audience of the franchise are the people who prefer more cartoony or anime-style games. Hence the big overlap between DN and Genshin players. Identity decided to experiment with an opposite-looking art style, and I'm pretty sure that was one of the reasons the game failed to appeal to the fans of the source material. But maybe that's not such a big deal, since they've significantly improved the combat compared to the last mobile titles, and the story isn't plagued by butchered lore. So anyway, this game shut down 5 months after its release. Yeah, just like that. They didn't even give a reason why, apparently. This thing was pulled off the shelves faster than the radioactive Walmart shrimp. Even the absolute garbage that was Dragon Nest Saint Haven had a longer lifespan than this game, and that's just embarrassing. Luckily for all anime fans, Identity took the hint and never tried to make a hyper-realistic game ever again. And if you're not a fan of the games that look like anime, how did you even make it this far into the video? What the hell? Serencia Saga is a Japan-exclusive Dragon Nest game developed by Gumi. No, not the Vocaloid. It might be a bit weird that we have this new random company popping out of nowhere, but their dev team was being led by a former producer of the official Japanese division, Kono Aiki, so there's that. Apparently the true reason this game exists was because Kono wanted to create a Dragon Nest title tailored specifically to the Japanese player base. Since, according to him, the original game has a lot of aspects that the Japanese players don't want, so he decided to make his own Dragon Nest with mahjong and geishas. This is why Serencia Saga looks and feels much more anime compared to all the previous titles we've already seen. The most unique part about this game is that it doesn't take place in Legendia, or even Mistland for that matter, but in a completely different world called Serencia. Hence, the name. Our first introduction with the game starts with this high-effort cutscene of the original gang facing off against the Serpent Dragon. Our boy Kono claimed that none of the models and animations have been ripped from the original DN, but I'm not really sure about that. However, the playable character models definitely look new, and you can tell because these models actually have face rigging unlike the source material. The only part I don't like about them is that their hair low-key looks like it's made of clay, but I don't know. Maybe that's what the Japanese players want. The battle leads Warrior to accidentally get separated from the rest of the gang, and he enters some strange dungeon while trying to find a way back up the mountain. This is where we're introduced to the controls, along with some new mechanics, such as sleeping enemies that we can sneak by without having to fight, and useless arrows that point towards the giant portal in the distance you could have already seen, because there is literally no other possible way for you to go. But maybe the Japanese players just love arrows. After we go through the portal of seamless audio transition, we get our first taste of this game's combat. Oddly enough, the gameplay here could be compared to a rhythm game. If you repeatedly tap the normal attack, you perform a special attack. and the skills are activated by tapping the indicated combination in the highlighted order. That way, multiple skill combos can be pressed with only 2 buttons. Alternatively, you could just hold down the button for normal attack and slide your finger to use the skills. I think such a simplified combat mechanic was implemented because Serencia Saga has another unique quirk. It can be played in both portrait and landscape mode. This feature was implemented because a lot of mobile games in Japan are playable in portrait mode, so you could play them while riding the subway on your way to be a corporate wage slave. You know, maybe the original DN could learn a thing or two from Serencia. I know just how hard it is to play as Wander while my other hand is too busy. At least Kyle is a good boy and only shows up in the cutscenes. Not gonna lie, I did not expect to learn this cultural phenomenon while researching a Dragon Nest spin-off game of all things, so the more you know, I guess. Anyway, regarding the party composition, you can choose one out of the 4 classes as your main and add 2 more characters onto your team as supporting members. And yeah, the game is designed so you'll always have that one bro left out. It's actually very nice of Serencia Saga to give us the option to pretend Cleric doesn't exist. Oddly enough, you can see that there are multiple empty character portraits, so it's possible that they were planning to expand the playable roster. And they actually did, when they added Academic on December 14th, 2017. Honestly, Academic being in the game was inevitable, since we all know how much the Japanese love little girls.
I got to lolly.
Back to the story. When you get to the boss part of the dungeon, you find out that all of your friends already made their way in, even though they were on the mountain when Warrior found the dungeon entrance first, so how the hell did these 3 manage to get there before him? And wait a minute, this isn't even the same dragon we were fighting before. Where the hell is the serpent? Did our friends just defeat it off camera and now we are fighting a completely different dragon? Well, maybe I'm just too white to understand the refined taste of the Japanese consumer. But I guess the real reason this part doesn't make any sense was because it was all just a dream, and the real game only starts now. The main quest is fully done in the visual novel style, since we all know that Japanese people love visual novels. The best part about the quest is Cleric constantly saying By the way, Cleric is voiced by the same guy who voices Yu, and Sorceress is voiced by the actress of Yukiko, so this is the closest we get to the mobile port of Persona 4. Anyway, the plot of Serencia Saga is this. The main 4 are special because they were born with a glowing symbol of the goddess. By the way, the goddess here is also different. Instead of Althea, we have Farminas. At least I think that's how you say that. The heroes were summoned by the queen, who tells them that an evil dragon that was sealed away by the goddess had awakened, and they are the only ones who can stop him. The dragon can't move past the barrier, but it can summon monsters that terrorize the citizens. For some reason, the only name that wasn't changed from the original game is Saint Haven. I guess the Japanese players really like that town. However, the mark of the goddess is not enough, because the nest of the dragon is covered in a mist that corrodes people's bodies. Now where have I heard of that before? The only way to gain immunity against the not mistland poison is to overcome the so-called trials of the goddess. And the rest of this game is going to be exactly about that. Going around the world of Not Legendia and overcoming said trials. But actually, there is another aspect of Serencia Saga that I haven't talked about. Gambling. That's right, just like Saint Haven, this is also a gacha game. I guess that must mean the Japanese players love gacha.
Gacha!
There are 3 types of things you can pull for: weapons, armor, and cosmetics. I even found a dedicated gacha videos of people just filming their pulls. In case you're not one of them gambling addicts, there is also an option to craft items, although I have no clue how good are the crafted weapons compared to the gacha ones. I also have no way of knowing just how generous or not the game was with the way to earn free pulls, so unfortunately, I cannot comment on that. And I think that is literally everything this game has to offer. Button mash dungeon gameplay and gambling. This is exactly what the Japanese love, right? But how can we make sure of that? Unfortunately, I couldn't find any Serencia Saga stats, but what I can say is that this game has been shut down ever since March 28, 2018. Meanwhile, the official Dragon Nest Japanese server is still operating to this very day. But how could that be? The spokesperson of the whole Japan said that it doesn't have what the Japanese players want. Alright, this bit has overstayed its welcome by this point. In case you couldn't tell by now, I think the idea of taking some game franchise and remaking it to try and make it appeal to a specific nationality is rather unnecessary in my opinion. Especially considering that Dragon Nest was already rather popular in Japan, creating something like this makes even less sense. The only advantage Serencia Saga had going for it over the original DN is that it can be played on your phone during school lunch or something. Or at the very least it had that advantage, until better contenders have entered the market. I thought this entry was going to be just like any other. But to my surprise, the history of this game turned out to be much more complicated than I anticipated. Originally, World of Dragon Nest was announced around 2016, and was supposed to be a cross-platform experience. This idea was scrapped, and the game was released in Southeast Asia on January 8, 2020, as a mobile only. Meanwhile, the Chinese version of the game was being actively tweaked and developed parallel to the Southeast Asian project. Then gradually, the Southeast Asian servers began shutting down one by one, with the last one being Taiwanese, closing on September 9th of 2023. But then, in 2025, the Chinese World of Dragon Nest had been finalized, and it ended up being a completely different game than the previously released version. Yes, there are two drastically different games, both named World of Dragon Nest, which definitely didn't make the research for this video unnecessarily confusing. Anyway, for the sake of clarity, and because labeling these two as the same game will give me a cognitive dissonance, this entry is going to be all about the version of the game that was eventually scrapped. The version that is currently playable will be in the Dragon Nest M Classic entry. I'd say this particular DN game has two main defining features. The first one is the option to choose the gender of every playable character. This feature has never been present in any other game in the series before, and was very desired in the original DN, so I actually find this pretty cool. Once again, we don't talk about Arta. And the second thing is that besides the OG4, Academic and later Assassin, World of Dragon Nest has an exclusive class never seen before or after, Slayer. And it's a real shame that they're never getting added to the original game because, well, they slayed. Their main weapon is dual blades, and the secondary one is flying swords. Now you may say that Slayer is just a dollar store assassin, but I will not be hearing any of the slander. In fact, if you thought that Assassin was an edgelord, just wait till you hear the Slayer specializations. Slaughterer, Executioner, Dawn Slider, and Edge Slinger. Yeah, we ain't beating the emo allegations with this one. Talking about emos and other alts, now would be a good time to reveal that the main story in this game is actually going to revolve around my boy Velskut this time. Alright, this game is already getting bonus points from me just for that. Anyway, the plot takes a deviation from the original lore in a way that kinda reminds me of what they tried to do in the movie. Except it isn't actual garbage. In this universe, the Black Dragon was a much bigger threat, to the point where during the battle only Gerant and Velskut remained the last standing. The rest of Legendia was also in shambles, and completely ravaged by the dragon and monsters. By the time Gerant turned into a dragon and defeated Karas, he was too exhausted and immediately lost consciousness. But instead of helping his friend, Velskut chose to take the power of the Black Dragon for himself, since he thought, well, the world is about to end anyway, so why not? Here's why I'll already have to say that this choice is incredibly out of character, considering that the real Velskut didn't even want the jewel and merged with it by complete accident. However, you could argue that since Velskut felt betrayed after finding out Gerant was a dragon, he decided to betray Gerant in return, so hey, at least it kinda makes sense. But Westwood came to regret this decision almost immediately. Because even though he had gained dragon power, he remained completely alone in a dying world, with guilt gnawing on his mind every passing moment. So in the last attempt to fix everything, he went out to find Lunaria so she could send him back to the past. Yeah, it's kinda interesting that here Westwood actually knows who she is for some reason. Anyhow, Lunaria agrees to bring him back to the past, but not to play shitty games that Saga has, but to learn basic controls from Gerard. Man, I wish we stayed playing as Westwood for the rest of the game, but unfortunately this is just a tutorial feature. The combat system here is this. Besides normal attack and ultimate, there are also two types of skills, active skills and chain skills. Chain skills become available once you accumulate enough spirit by tapping the normal attack and using an active skill once. This is kinda similar to what we had in Legend, except instead of a chain it's just 2 beads. So anyway, we meet up with the rest of the 6 heroes gang and... Wait a minute, what the fuck happened to Teramai again? Well, at least he does resemble his true form now. But why does he have grey old man hair in his 20s? What did I say? They always find a way to fuck Teramai up. They fight the Black Dragon, and it gets to the point where the timeline splits up. And... Hold up, where the hell did Argenta even come from? Literally, why is she even here? She does absolutely nothing except run away with the rest of the gang. There is a reason why she wasn't present during the battle in the original game. So why even add her? Well, whatever. This time around, Westwood doesn't get mad at Gerard for being a dragon, and we get the good ending. Or do we? Honestly, there's too much going on in this game's story for me to explain here. And I do mean a lot. So if you do wanna hear what's going on in this strange universe, this is gonna have to be its own separate video. Regarding gameplay, World of Dragon Nest was the first in the series to be an open world game, meaning that now instead of dungeons you go around the map and fight mobs in the overworld. Though I also have to note some extra features like doing small errands in town for some extra rewards and milking a cow. In every other aspect, this game is very similar to the original Dragon Nest experience. We even get the return of character customization, which we haven't seen for a while now. However, before I can tell you about what happened to the world of Dragon Nest after its major reboot, first I have to tell you about the next game in our timeline. Yes, Dragon Nest was so good, they released Dragon Nest 2. 2 separate times. And appropriately for the sequel, this game absolutely mocks every previous title in the graphics department. Although I do have to admit that the models do look a bit goofy, especially after seeing these weird AI promotional pics. The character selection screen though, absolute cinema. We do still have the ever-present character selection tree. However, this time they actually managed to incorporate it in a unique way and with quality animations. Just like the previous game, Evolution also has the option to choose your character's gender, but not really. You can only do so with Cleric and Academic. For the rest of the class, the option shows up as locked. I guess these two were the only ones who could afford the surgery. This is probably because the alternative gender options for the others were planned to be added in the future, which never happened. Talking about classes, this game had 6, the OG 4 including Academic and Assassin. But what I had to note above all is the character customization. Evolution absolutely destroyed every previous game's character creator. It lets you customize almost every aspect of the face, down to even the shape. You can even make your characters have heterophobia in their eyes. Make sure to balance that out with the gay pride hairstyle. But my favorite part is that you can actually start out with an outfit that isn't absolute ass for once. Anyway, the plot of the game goes like this. Something happened to the 6 heroes and they aren't here anymore. Really, I have no idea where they went. Rose, as we all know, became evil and emo. So in order to make her normal again and stop the monolith from opening, we have to find something known as the Sage Stone, which definitely has nothing in common with the Philosopher's Stone. We do find it, and it was surprisingly easy actually. Judging by the name, you'd think this would be the ultimate MacGuffin of the game. As soon as we get the stone, our friend pulls up with a whole airship to take us back. Our friend Merle. She's just gonna be Mer now. And she's an archer hybrid. Well, props to them for trying to break the elf archer stereotype. But her pulling up like this is still kinda funny, since we all know how well hybrids and airships go together. Out of nowhere, the two suddenly get attacked by this random ass fire dragon, who is definitely not Rubinard, by the way. Mer leaves to distract the dragon, so we could safely get the stone out of here. Upon this, we get probably the most awkward flying ship animation I've ever seen. From that point on, the cutscene marathon is over, and the game actually begins. Hold the fuck up! Is that fucking Fiona? From Shrek? I'm sorry, am I seeing this right? How the hell have I never seen anyone mention that there's a goddamn Shrek crossover in Dragon Nest 2 of all things? Anyway, ignoring the fact that there might be Shrek hiding somewhere in the Keldrock woods, the overall map design is actually pretty cool. I love the fact that you can see all the speech bubbles pop up when you walk past the NPCs. It really makes the town feel more alive and lived in. But what I do not love is the monster suddenly popping in out of thin air. Yeah, just like the world of Dragon Nest, Evolution is also an open world game. Now I don't know if this is the hardware difference of the two people recording these games, but I feel like the world of Dragon Nest was a bit smoother on the monster spawning regard. Although, to be more precise, this is not a fully open world, because it also has dungeons mixed in alongside it. They're called the Forbidden Ground, and it's basically story-driven combat challenge dungeons. In that aspect, they're pretty similar to the original Dragon Nest gameplay. Talking about combat, you might be wondering how come I haven't explained Evolution's mechanics yet. Well, that's because there isn't actually really much to explain here. There is no quirky mechanics this time around like in the world of Dragon Nest or Legend. Just tap the skill buttons to use them. You have 7 active skills, 1 ultimate, and the option to auto-target the enemies. However, I do have to note that there is a skill tree system similar to the original game, where you can pick and choose which skills to upgrade and use. You could call this an upgraded combat system from M, oddly enough. And it's funny how I mentioned M just now, because as it turned out, many people have been comparing these two games. Some were much harsher than ours. You definitely can't say that these games have the same assets. Well, maybe I could agree on the environment part, but definitely not the character models and animations. M just straight up has everything from the original DN, meanwhile Evolution only has 90% of things from the original DN. Yeah, I'm not making this case any better, am I? At least Evolution definitely made the graphics look cleaner, which I suppose would be understandable since these two games are 4 years apart. But anyway, everybody is definitely getting tired of eating the same assets for breakfast, dinner and supper. But we already know that Dragon Nest is a certified expert of reheating the same meal over and over again. So, what are the other gripes that the players had with this game? Well, another major factor is that the game was obnoxiously pay to win. And nobody likes pay to win unless you're that one guy from Reddit. If we were to believe this post, we can calculate that 1000 gems would be equal around $14. Which means if you wanted to buy the best pet in the game, you would need to spend a whopping $840. And if you also want a stat boost costume, you'd need to cash out another $672 on top of that. You could literally buy every Sims 4 expansion pack with that kind of money and still have some left over. And not to mention that there is also a pet and costume gacha. One person even claims that the cash shop prices were so outrageous that the game is actually the opposite of pay to win, because even Mr. Beast level whales would hesitate to spend their money in the cash shop. Shanda must have seen all the DoorDash delivery fees and thought, well, if them Americans can afford all that, that must mean they'd be more than happy to play our game. Those are not microtransactions anymore. Those are macrotransactions. And if you thought all this wasn't bad enough, despite desperately wishing for those sweet American dollars, Shanda didn't even put any effort into making the game actually playable for anyone around that half of the world. Yeah, despite it being a global release, none of the servers were located outside Southeast Asia, which led to everyone who wasn't from there having atrocious ping. Other problems mentioned by the players include a dead and unbalanced PvP arena that only has bots and is limited to only 5 games per day, menus that aren't properly translated, ridiculously delayed content updates as the global server didn't even get an academic release, and the last one I'll mention is the low amount of available parties for party content despite the supposedly high player base. Yeah, as you can see, despite it being one of the best looking Dragon Nest games, it is certainly one of the least beloved ones. Once again, I'll remind you that I haven't played any of these games besides the original DN one, so I have to form my opinion from just what I see. However, during my research, Evolution was the only game where I stumbled upon such negative discourse without even trying, so that certainly says a lot. Overall, the game certainly has improvements compared to the previous titles like M, such as graphics, character customization and expansive maps. But simultaneously, it also takes 2 steps back in regards of the player experience. In the end, the negatives ended up massively overwhelming the positives, which resulted in the global server shutting down on November 10th of 2025. As of now, the game only remains playable in China. However, judging by the lack of major updates, death will probably be knocking on its door soon as well. Alright, funniest shit ever. While my ass was taking forever to finish this video, it was announced that the Chinese server is shutting down on June 9th of this year. So yeah, rip in peace Dragon Nest Evolution. So what is the moral of this story, guys? If the microtransactions in your game start costing more than the entire Sims 4 library, something must have gone terribly, terribly wrong. Alright, this is a weird one. Originally, I almost didn't even include this in the list of games, and found out it exists by complete accident. And the reason this game is so special is because it's a Dragon Nest game that is not affiliated with Identity or Shanda. Instead, it was made by a completely unrelated company named Lulin Games. All I've managed to gather about them is that there's some very obscure devs from Malaysia. I can only guess that the reason they weren't sued into oblivion was either because they aren't located in mainland China or because they acquired some kind of license. Either way, this game somehow materialized into existence, and I find that the most fascinating part about it. Dragon Nest, Legends Never Die, or just Dragon Nest L for short. Yeah, the irony isn't lost on me here. Is an attempt to port the classic Dragon Nest experience onto a mobile platform, which is definitely a unique concept never before conceived in the history of mankind. But the funniest part of this is that somehow a completely unaffiliated company managed to make the most accurate mobile adaptation of the original game up to this point. Yeah, almost everything in this game is the exact same as the PC title. The most noticeable graphical difference are some weird camera movements during cutscenes, but other than that, it's almost undistinguishable from the original game. The additional features I can note is the auto-path finding and an option for text-to-speech in the chat. Hell, even the character creation screen is the same. The only thing they couldn't fully port over is the combat system. Since, you know, I can only imagine the horror that the piano of skills would be like on mobile. Instead, we just have the 10 main skills, an ultimate, the jump and dodge buttons and the special attack. Just like the OG game, the skill selection is fully customizable. But before you prepare your round of applause, I'm gonna have to ask you to hold back, since this mobile port might not be as revolutionary as it may seem. And to find out what I mean by that, you'll just have to wait until you see our next entry. Honestly, I don't even know what else I can say about this game since it is so similar to our very first entry, so I think that's enough. But what I can say is that Dragon Nest L remained on the Play Store until 10th of January 2025. But if you think that's because Identity finally got their ass, you're actually wrong. The real reason was because our friends over at Lulin Games decided to cook something else up, and this game was just a beta test experiment. But before I can talk about that, we first have to get back to the game that I had promised we'd hear more of earlier. Okay, we have reached the point in the timeline where all games from this point on are still gonna be playable as of February 2026. Here we are finally gonna find out what happened at the final release of The World of Dragon Nest. But first I have to say that this game has 3 completely different titles depending on where you're from. In China it's called The World of Dragon Nest. On Southeast Asia it is called Dragon Nest M Classic, not to be confused with Dragon Nest M, and in Taiwan it's called Dragon Nest Classic Reappearance, not to be confused with Dragon Nest Classic that is coming up later. Yeah, I have no idea why they decide to overcomplicate this so much. To make things simpler, I'm just gonna refer to it as M Classic from now on. Anyhow, remember every unique aspect of the World of Dragon Nest that I've mentioned in its previous entry. You know, the different story and the Slayer class, for example. Well, you can completely forget about any of that, because this version decided to fully start over, and now it's just one more mobile port of the original game. Yeah, now you see why we decided to classify these two as completely separate games. Weirdly enough, now this game is more compatible with the Dragon Nest L bootleg than the initial World of Dragon Nest, which leads me to believe Lulin might have borrowed the source code for this game and tried to release their version first. I mean, look at this, they even both have the same PNG of Irene. As of now, the game only has 6 classes. The OG4, Academic and Kali, who literally just been added at the time of me writing this. Besides the major differences in the UI compared to L, M Classic starts you out in this combat tutorial area instead of just throwing you straight into the game. The combat system is also extremely similar, except for the... Oh my god, what the hell is this absolute clusterfuck? I guess M Classic tried to come as close to the piano of skills as they could with a whopping 14 skill slots. I mean, I am impressed with the dedication, however this looks like a misclick minefield just waiting to happen, especially in that tiny window. If anyone watching this actually played this game, could you please tell me if this feels just as bad as it looks or not? And just for reference, how long would you say your fingers are? Overall, this game has been received very positively from what I've seen, and has been rather successful so far, especially compared to Evolution. But to me personally, the funniest part about it were the multiple weird ads released by Shanda Games. Like, the academic release one is kinda cute, they really went all in with the real life stand. But then we get to the Taiwanese ad that is literally dropping bars. The rapper that they got for this is named MC Hot Dog, also known as the father of Taiwanese hip-hop music. That's how you know he's the real deal. Then we get an ad that is a whole 6-minute mini-movie about Gerant if he was in heaven. This ad is the most relatable, because this is definitely me when I try to go about my daily life without thinking about Dragon Nest. But if you think that all of their ads were this high production and budget, you should take a look at this absolute masterpiece.
不可以到诞生于2010年的经典游戏，它有这样的特点。
You stupid!
The glorious editing, the random thuds, the visible mics, The echoed audio and the overall awkward atmosphere of a homework assignment video skit have all been masterfully combined to create this. This whole video legit feels like it was filmed by fans goofing off at a convention rather than an actual ad. In fact, I won't be surprised if this was actually made by some random Shanda employees, because you can see the glimpse of some office in the background of one of the shots. I just hope they got paid very well for this. Anyway, I honestly can't say much about this game. It's a pretty faithful recreation of the original Dragon Nest experience, but for your phone. Which means that Identity had finally fulfilled their dream of properly porting their game over onto mobile. So that's it then. The players are happy, the company has reached their main goal, everybody got what they wanted. So that means this should be the last Dragon Nest game, right? Check your progress bar right now. This is gonna be another controversial entry on my list, alongside M Classic. Since, even though it is called a classic server, personally I consider it to be a completely separate game from the original Dragon Nest. Hell, they even have completely different websites. However, to understand why this version of the game even exists, we're gonna have to come back to the first game, specifically the Cap 80 incident. Level 80 cap is universally considered to be the point where new Dragon Nest took over the classic age. It came out around 2014, which, if you remember, was around the time when Identity began dipping their toes into the mobile market. But releasing new games wasn't the only way they tried to attract mobile players. No, for some reason they decided that the game known for having challenging combat was actually too challenging for the average consumer, and decided to massively nerf the experience for everyone. Dungeons became significantly easier, and the leveling progress has become noticeably sped up. Instead of strategizing and learning the boss mechanics, the game just became about killing everything as fast as possible, and getting to the max level became the first priority. As someone who played Dragon Nest both before and after this update, I can certainly attest to how drastically different both of these experiences are. This is why nowadays getting from Keldruk to Saint Haven takes like a couple of hours instead of a week of side quests it used to be. As you can imagine, nobody liked that. People often list different factors that eventually led to the downfall of Dragon Nest, but I think this was their gradual beginning of the end. Nowadays it is impossible to revert the game to its original state, even if Identity wanted to. And at this point, if they actually did, they just lose the new audience they were attracted by transforming the game in the first place, while the old audience had long moved on. That is why they decided to completely start over and just re-release the old experience that was lost. Introducing Dragon Nest Classic. Classic is the only other PC title on this list besides the original game. And it is exactly what it is described as. The exact same game Dragon Nest used to be before the dreaded updates. The cap situation is kinda weird, as some subservers have higher caps than the rest. From what I understood, the majority of Chinese subservers are at cap 40. Meanwhile, the Nostalgia Zone subserver is at cap 60 for some reason. Anyway, I'm just gonna count the highest available cap as the canon one. There are 6 main classes, the first 5 of whom I probably shouldn't even mention anymore, with the latest addition being Kali. So you think, alright, the rest have already seen the consequences of their actions in the original game, which means they won't step on the same rakes twice this time around, right? Well, remember how I said there are 6 main classes in this game? Now why do you think I specified them to be the main ones? The reason is because on December 2nd of 2025, Shanda suddenly announced the release of the Dark Avenger, which originally only came out during the infamous cap level 80. And not only did they decide to introduce a spin-off class out of nowhere, turns out that this version of the game didn't even intend to have any spin-offs in the first place. Yeah, as you can imagine, the players did not like these news one bit. I mean, for some people, especially the PvP players, the lack of spin-offs was the whole appeal of the game. To be fair, one of its main features is the lack of power creep characters that the spin-offs literally embody. So, are you guys starting to see the problem here? The other part of the announcement the players were clowning on was the release of yet one more sub-server called Heart Pounding or something like that. I didn't mention this about the previous games, but they often had a bunch of sub-servers that were introduced and then merged and so on until the game eventually died. Well, this game is plagued by the same thing, except now it's an open beta for an open beta that was released a year ago. So yeah, instead of getting the players' hearts throbbing with excitement, they got their hearts throbbing in gamer rage. At this point you might be wondering, what could have possibly prompted things to suddenly deteriorate? As it turns out, the game's design team was replaced by the same people who work on the original game. I'm not sure what happened to the first team. I just hope they weren't taken to the back of the Shanda building and executed for daring to try to make a good game over profits. Anyway, it's not exactly reassuring to see red flags popping up when the game hasn't even been out for 2 years yet. At the same time, it's too early to write up a conclusive verdict just yet. After all, the game is still active, so there's time to change things for the better. Or for worse. Here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that Identity doesn't actually own the rights to Dragon Nest Classic? The actual owner of this particular IP is the parent company that owns both Shanda and Identity. Yes, Big Daddy Shanda is a subsidiary of an even bigger company that I'm not even gonna attempt pronouncing. This is why Classic came out in China way before it did in Korea. Because of this arrangement, Identity has to upkeep a license in order to operate the Korean and Southeast Asian servers. And if you are wondering, the current contract only lasts for 2 years, so yeah. If you are playing on either of these two servers... But while we wait to see what happens, let's take a look at the other updates in the landscape of Dragon Nest gaming. You guys still remember Dragon Nest L? Good. And do you remember what I said about it being removed from the Play Store because the devs wanted to release something else? Well, this entry is exactly what I was teasing. And it is the exact same game as Dragon Nest L, except now it's called Dragon Nest Rebirth of Legend. Oh, and also it's fully in English now. What I didn't tell you about Dragon Nest M Classic is that it actually had English voice acting for cutscenes and NPCs.
Rose, where are you?
Rebirth of Legend now has it too, except all of their voices are ripped from the NA server. That's it. If you didn't decide to skip the Dragon Nest L section of the video, then you have already seen this game. I have absolutely nothing else to add here. Honestly, I have no idea why this game even exists, especially since it's almost identical to M Classic. I guess this game was made specifically for the people who absolutely despise Shanda and Identity as a fuck you option to still play the game without supporting them. And honestly, if that's what you do, I think that's low-key based actually. Although I kinda doubt that it's gonna do anything to affect these companies like this at all. Especially considering that they aren't planning to stop the mobile pilgrimage with the release of Dragon Nest M. Finally, we are right at the latest Dragon Nest title. And it is so fresh in fact, that it hadn't even been announced yet and only been name dropped in the latest Shanda annual Lunar New Year meeting that came out as I was actually writing the script for this video. However, the trademark for the project has already been approved on May 21st, 2025. So it's been quietly cooking for around 9 months at the time I released this. At this moment we don't even have any details about the game, or screenshots for that matter. But judging by the name alone, I'm gonna take a wild guess that it's just gonna be the original game again, but remastered. All we know is that it's supposed to be the first cross-platform title in the series. But we already know what didn't really work out with World of Dragon Nest, so we can just hope that they pull through this time around. However, what I can't tell you right now is that apparently the future of Shanda's parent corporation is riding on the success of Remastered. Identity's grandpa acquired Shanda in 2019. And this acquisition had proven around beneficial in improving the holding stock following the success of Dragon Nest M. But unfortunately the current Shanda products aren't enough to attract new investors. That's where Remastered comes in. We actually get a few indirect hints about future plans for the upcoming game in the annual meeting that I've mentioned previously. In it, the chairman of Shanda Games, Wang Ji, discussed the new directions the company is planning to take regarding game development. Firstly, he announces the plans to strive for the international market instead of just targeting China. From this we can guess that the Dragon Nest remake is going to be a global release. For now it's impossible to say just how global it will actually be, as something is telling me it's just gonna be Asia again. Secondly, he said they should continue to target the mobile sector because of the profit potential, which means that if the cross-platform falls through again, we can expect another mobile game. And the last and most controversial point I wanna mention is using more AI. Yes, I am not kidding. That is exactly what he says. I'm not sure where exactly they're planning to implement even more AI, since Shanda has already been using it to make 3D models, code, concept designs, and whatever else. Anyway, don't be surprised if Remastered is gonna have straight up unfiltered AI art in their game. Oh god, don't tell me they're gonna start writing the lore with it too. What if they already started doing it? Well, at least that explains whatever the hell is happening in the ancient arc, but yeah, red flags are raising already. Anyway, that is all we know about Remastered at the moment. Boy, I sure hope no major announcements gonna come out the moment I upload this video to make it instantly age like milk. And this is it. Literally every Dragon Nest game explained to you in as much detail as reasonably possible. Let's summarize what we've just learned. Out of the 18 games in total, only 15 of them have ever been playable, with Origin never being released along with Dragon Nest vs Dungeon Striker, and Remastered still being in the works. 15 of these games are mobile, 2 are PC, and 1 possibly cross-platform. If we look at the timeline we've got as a whole, we can classify some of the eras the franchise has gone through over the years. 2010 through 2013 was the pure era. This was the prime of Dragon Nest, and it was still the only child of its developers, before they got the idea of expanding into the mobile market. 2014 through 2019 was the experimental era. This was the time when the original game and the franchise as a whole was going through a transitional period of change and discovery. For the PC Dragon Nest, this materializes game-changing updates and system overhauls. Meanwhile, the franchise expanded to a range of varied and odd products as an attempt to find the most successful format and establish itself on the mobile market. 2020 to present day is the Rebirth era. By that point, the developers have figured out that the most successful Dragon Nest spin-off titles are just the original game's experience, revamped with as little change as possible. From that point on, all of the development efforts were poured into creating exactly that. Judging by what we've heard about Remastered, it could be the ultimate product of everything Identity has learned from the past 2 eras combined. In conclusion, Identity tried to experiment with a bunch of games, formats and platforms. But in the end, what people actually wanted was already there from the very start. I guess you could say the moral of this long and expensive story is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, just imagine what Dragon Nest could be today if they used all this money to improve the game instead of wasting it on a bunch of mid-ass mobile games nobody even wanted. And now, I wanna play a quick round of the Game Awards with every spin-off title. The title of the most unique spin-off goes to Dragon Nest Continent Exploration. After all, it's the only Dragon Nest game that doesn't even have any combat in it. Next we have the most obscure spin-off, which goes to Dragon Nest vs Dungeon Striker. because it is so obscure that I almost didn't even put it on this list. The title of the worst spin-off game goes to Dragon Nest Saint Haven. I really don't think anybody's gonna argue against that. And the title of the best spin-off goes to... Actually, that's gonna be up to you to decide. Yes, you. What do you think the best Dragon Nest game is? Not counting the original one. And which of these games have you actually played personally? I'd love to hear all about it. Alright, now that the engagement beta is out of the way, this is my cue to end this long ass video already. Hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.